All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be on this knife, and this is the Gradation Cutlery number 05 keychain knife. And all of these here are in Sandbar Stag. There's two different versions, and this version is the Sheepfoot version. So what is the number 05? What is this knife? So it's a new pattern for Gradation Cutlery, and that is why it has this etch that people often ask about on the back of the blade, which is PPP in a circle, which stands for Pattern Production Premiere. So this is the first time that Gradation Cutlery is making this pattern. Now, they did make a keychain knife previously for a specific dealer a while back. It didn't actually have a pattern number, and apparently they were all, cut out. They didn't actually make a die for the pattern. So this is the first pattern that Gradation Cutlery has for a keychain knife. So it's pretty cool, and it's something that I was really interested in when they were first announced because I like keychain knives. So first of all, this is a very small knife. I'm going to give you some comparisons. So this is the world's most sold knife, the Victorinox Classic, and you can see that it's pretty close in size to the 05. And then this is a Spyderco Ladybug, another really common small keychain knife, and you can see it's also pretty common, pretty similar in length, but definitely a lot taller. So the 05 is a very, very small knife, and it is actually the shortest knife that Gradation Cutlery has made. It's a little shorter than the 22 Magnum, which was previously the shortest knife. So very small. And because of that, I did think that this knife was going to end up being something like $50 to $60, something around that range. Now, it ended up that the first dealers that were selling this knife, they were in the $85 to $90 range. And that was a little bit too much for me. But then some other dealers, I got this knife from JSR Sports and More, were around $70. So this one was about $73, and these actually just went up on Knife Ship Free for about $68. So around $70, and I think that that's a much better price than the 85 or 90 for the size and what you're getting, but still a little bit more than I was expecting. I was planning, if these were in that $50 range, to get a few of these to keep and give away as gifts to family and friends and such later on. But let's take a look at the knife itself and what you're really getting. So first of all, the 05 pattern here, you can see that it's an equal end. It does have a keychain hole here, and attached to it, it comes with a leather loop that says Gradation Cutlery, so that's a nice little touch. You could definitely put this on your keychain, but I also think, especially with this lanyard coming with the knife, it would be a good watch pocket knife. Slip it in your watch pocket and be able to grab it out with this lanyard. It's a shadow pattern. That means that there's no bolsters on either side, and the pins are just through the handle material or the cover material. And one nice thing about that, one thing that I like about that, is that the pivot pin is actually riveted. So there's a washer below the pin, and it's riveted down onto that washer. And I like that because it makes it much less likely that there will develop side-to-side blade play in the pivot. It's a lot sturdier than a normal just peened pivot pin. So I do like that. As you can see, there are really no gaps at all. It's actually really nicely put together. No gaps between the back spring and the liners. The back spring itself sits maybe a little low at full closed, pretty much even, maybe slightly high at half open. It does have a half stop, and then slightly high, but not too high at full open. Pretty good, and not something I worry about too much. Now, it came pretty much perfectly centered, and it has really nice action. So you can hear the snap. It is not a strong pull. I'd call it pretty much a 5, but it does snap open and close really nicely. As for the tip, so some of these I have seen that have come with proud tips, and if you watch my videos, I am not a fan of proud tips at all, but also not a fan of blade wrap. So it's kind of a balance between the two. And mine did not come with a proud tip. As you can see, that tip sits pretty well within the frame there. It doesn't seem to have blade wrap either, but I will say that the tip, and I'll see if I can get this to show it all. the tip is, there we go, right here. You can see that the tip has a somewhat rolled edge. I don't really think that that's blade wrap just because of where it is. It could be, but I haven't sharpened this knife, so I'm not sure. I think it's more likely just came from the factory that way. But something to watch out for, you know, a proud tip, and then on the other end, blade wrap. Another thing I like about this knife is that this hole, the hole for the key ring, it sits pretty well above, so with a key ring this size, you don't really have to worry about it getting in the way of the blade closing too much. On some knives, that is an issue. So I do like that it's centered as compared to on the Classic. You can see if you're closing the scissors on a Classic, they can get stuck on that key ring. So I do like that it is centered on the 05. My Stag, so the other thing with these knives is that there's kind of a wide range of Stag from what I've seen from the production pictures, ranging from pretty bad, something I wouldn't be super happy to get, to pretty okay. And I think I landed on that better end of the scale. So I think this is pretty okay Stag. You can see it does have some nice character to it on both sides, some kind of gnarliness and some valleys and such. I also like that it's actually pretty thin and evenly matched in the center. It makes for a pretty good grip here. You know, you'd be using this knife in a pinch grip like this. You're not gonna try to, you know, hammer grip it. Usually maybe like this, but more often like this, I think. And it actually does feel pretty good with that thin Stag at the center. Another thing that's really kind of interesting about this is that I've found it to be pinchable. So that's a nice little thing, nice little feature. Something I wasn't really expecting with such a small blade, but I do find it to be pinchable. Another thing here with this is that speaking of the price, I do think that it would be nice if these were a little less. I was expecting them to be less for a couple reasons. First of all, it's a really small knife. Second of all, the Stag, from things I've seen online, seems to be leftover Stag from another run. So, you know, that's one thing. And then also, it's not like these blades were a new die or a new design. This Sheepfoot blade and the spear point, which is the other option, are both the secondary blades from the number 38 English Whittler that recently came out. So they didn't have to create new dies for these blades. So that's a couple reasons why I thought it might be a little bit less expensive. But one thing I do really like about this knife, especially for a keychain knife, is that it's in stainless. And Gradation Cutlery has not done a whole lot of stainless recently. I like carbon steel. I'm sure it's me saying that, you know, stainless is better for a keychain knife. People will not be happy with that, but I love carbon steel. I use it all the time. You know, I have no problem with carbon steel. But for a keychain knife, I think that stainless steel is nice because you can use it, close it, let it, you know, on your keys and not have to worry about wiping it off and things like that. Now, it wasn't really clear what type of stainless steel. They didn't say this was. They usually just say carbon or stainless steel. I emailed and Joan May said that this is 420 HC steel. So that's another thing, you know, it's not a surprise that they're using 420 HC. They've either used 440C or 420 HC in the past, usually. There's some exceptions, but 420 HC is definitely at this point a low-end steel, really on the low end of steels that are used on, you know, stainless steel knives today. So not a high-end steel, though I'm sure the heat treat is really well done, being that it's done by Peter's Heat Treating in Meadville. Pretty, you know, one of those things where I think you're still getting a good value, considering, first of all, I'm sure these will cost more on the secondary market. It's American made, it's a new pattern, it's really a pretty practical little knife. But one thing, especially with the blade wrap and proud tips issue, it's because this is based, this uses the same dies as the secondaries on the 38 English Whittler, but when you do have a proud tip, the way you correct it is by filing the kick. And I'm planning on doing a video on how to do that, but filing the kick means you actually file down that part, and I'll show you a different and more common style of kick for a main blade. This is what most of the kicks on GEC's main blades look like, and you can see that it protrudes a little bit more. It's a little bit farther from the bolster, and it makes it easier to get to if you do need to drop the kick. Now, this isn't necessarily how I recommend doing it, but just for an example, the file on a Swiss Army knife, you know, you could do that, and it's just going to be a little bit harder to get to that on this 05. You can see you kind of have to really get down in there. So another thing where it might be hard to file this kick on your own, you could do it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it'll be a little bit more difficult than on other, you know, GEC knives. So definitely some cool things about this knife. I love keychain knives, I love mini knives, and I'm happy to see Great Eastern Cutlery doing these kind of unusual things. I'm really happy to see them making new patterns still, coming out with new patterns, doing things their own way, and kind of quirky things. That's part of what I love about GEC. But I do think that there are some things that I don't love about this knife, particularly the price, and you know, that it is a little bit higher than I was expecting, and that it might be a little bit difficult to file that kick, considering the fact that it does seem like some might have proud tips and or blade wrap. But otherwise, a really well-made knife, a cool knife, a fun little knife, and one that I'm happy to have gotten. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it the thumbs up. Also, you can subscribe to my channel. I've got lots of other videos on knives like this and knife-related topics. You can check out my social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Knife Thoughts, and my website, knifethoughts.com. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.